Moths and rust will eat up any treasure you may store here. Thieves may break into your homes and steal your precious trinkets. Instead, put up your treasures in heaven where moths do not attack, where rust does not corrode, where thieves are barred at the door. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Welcome to Practicing the Practices, a learning and experiential podcast geared towards helping you apprentice with Jesus. We are in episode 3 of season 2, and Casey and I are talking about simplicity of stuff today.
And Brad, this is a tough one for me. I'm just going to say it's one that I'm so drawn to because it is so necessary in my life. I can be prone to more extra and excess. And we're kind of that family, Brad, where we don't really let our kids play with the garage door open because our garage is so embarrassingly full of junk.
Oh.
And I'm also kind of the mom that rolls up into the pickup line at school and I open my sliding van door, automatic van door, and stuff falls onto the curb and my kids are trying to get it back in the van before anybody sees.
It feels like we've now extended an open invitation to all of the people who have a Monica closet, if you're familiar with the TV show Friends, who have an overstuffed garage, who have storage centers down the road. This is a safe place.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And we're going to press in, though, to why simplifying the things that we own and possess can actually lead to greater joy and purpose with God. So thanks for joining us today. Let's get started. Casey, there's no secret that many of us in America, almost regardless of economic stratosphere, income diversity and income gaps exist, but we have so much stuff in America. I mentioned recently in a teaching that there are, as of 2022, 2.3 billion square feet of indoor storage facilities. That's enough square footage for every living American citizen to be housed. We have a lot of stuff, a lot of ownership. Many of these things are great blessings, but the complexity and the clutter and the stuff and the excess of possessions and money can lead to some traps, to some temptations in our life. Jesus, the apostles, they had some very specific words about how to think about our materials. So why is it so important for us to think about the practice of simplicity as it relates to the things that we own, to our possessions, to our income, et cetera?
Yeah, this is such a barrier to our peace that I think we're not even aware of. Our environment, our clutter, our stuff that we're managing, I think we carry really heavy weights all day long that we're not even realizing because we're not willing to let stuff go. And today we really want to explore, why are we not willing to let stuff go? And what's the emotional attachment? What's the why behind that? I love Adele Calhoun. You know I love Adele, Brad.
You do.
And she defines the practice of simplicity this way. Simplicity cultivates the great art of letting go. Simplicity aims at loosening inordinate attachment to owning and having, and with it brings freedom and generosity. So the more stuff that we own, the more we're kind of owned by our stuff. And today we really want to explore what it looks like to be able to kind of breathe freely, have some space, not only in our schedule like we've talked about, or just in our life, but also in our homes, in our stuff, to be able to open a drawer and not have it crammed to the brim with stuff. So I think it's really important at first to just take a moment and consider, and this will probably be a different answer for most of us, why do we have the clutter that we have? What is the compulsion with accumulating more stuff?
Jimmy Carter, former president of the United States, gave probably his most famous speech in 1979. And I find this particular speech interesting because of the time in history. So this is on the kind of back end of the collapse of the Soviet Union. There's all of this, conversation about socialism and versus capitalism and American spirit. Well, in that spirit, like Carter kind of tapped into something that I think we should consider that speaks to what you're talking about. This, like, why do we have so many things? And he said this. He said, and this was kind of a pivotal moment, like a shift in history. Like, we are actually, if you're my age, if you're in your 40s, even if you're 30s, you have lived through a shift in history where human identity is no longer defined by what one does, but by what one owns. But he goes on to say this, but we've discovered that owning things and consuming things does not satisfy our longing for meaning. We've learned that piling up material goods cannot fill the emptiness of lives which have no confidence or purpose. And that was 1979. Fast forward 25 years, we have even more stuff. And I'm not sure we've quite learned the lesson yet, that more things doesn't actually mean more purpose or more happiness or more joy.
So true. And so as we consider why is it that we have all this stuff, maybe it's scarcity. Maybe you have kind of a scarcity mentality, and you can check in with that. And we're just checking in, no judgment. Let's just take a moment, really consider, like, why do we have all this stuff? Maybe it's for status, kind of like what Brad's talking about. Maybe it's because you're just bored and you really haven't kind of tapped into your purpose in life. And so you're just kind of accumulating stuff because you're bored. Whatever that reason is, I think recognizing what that reason is will help this from happening again. Because how many of us have, like, cleaned out the garage, gotten rid of all the stuff, it feels so great, and then, like, a few months later, we're right back where we started.
But we live in this unique time that, again, I think this is different. The last, you call it 50 years, whatever, from all of human history. Shopping is no longer an activity to acquire the things you need to live. It is a recreation, right? Hey, do you want to go shopping?
Yeah.
Or now we can sit on our couch, and if we're bored, we just go to Amazon.com, and we don't even know what to search for. So we just start scrolling there is so much marketing towards our consumption, like more. It can really get us way out of control.
For sure. And so as we make these steps to declutter, this is not just an act of minimalism like we've talked about before. We're really trying to look at what a kingdom declutter looks like. So identifying the why and the disordered attachments that we have to stuff and what's behind that, and really praying with the Lord about that, I think will help get us off on the right foot. And then next, I just heard something that really impacted me on a podcast. And the woman that was talking, her name's Dana White, and she has a book called Decluttering at the Speed of Life. And she was talking about each person identifying their clutter threshold. So each of us has the ability, just like our capacity to manage our schedule or our energy capacity, we have a clutter capacity. And you've exceeded your clutter capacity when you feel out of control in your home and your surroundings. And basically what she says is, once you realize, like, I can't manage all of these items in my pantry, these shoes, because they're always everywhere, the only thing to really do is start getting rid of stuff until you finally feel that ease of managing your stuff.
We've got a guy in our church who, when we started talking about simplicity, he came to me and he said, man, I've recognized, and this was his quote, that a blessing can become an obligation and eventually a burden. And what he was describing is, he's got all of these things. In his case, he's kind of a tech guy, and so he's got all of these computers and technology parts, and now they require a lot of energy and time and focus for their upkeep, for their use. Time that he now recognizes oftentimes distracts him from the things that matter most, which is what we've got to. Like, back at the origin story of this podcast, we made the point, like, this is not about the erosion or elimination of joy or pleasure, quite the opposite. In that we're not simply trying to, eliminate things, but rather we're trying to make sure our life is ordered in such a way that which we value most, that which is most important, stays top shelf.
Absolutely. I love what that man said to you, and it really does just bring home the sobering fact that every single thing you own, whether we realize it or not, represents our time and our energy. And it needs to be maintained. Like you were just saying, Brad, it needs to be put away. And so if we feel like we're always at a time and, oh, why am I always cleaning? Or why am I spending so much time trying to figure out what to wear in the morning or whatever it is, that time is a lot of times just because we have too much stuff. And we've been saying over and over in these last couple podcasts that this is not about eliminating joy. I think I can hear like get rid of stuff. And it at first sounds like what, the process of simplicity is really about removing the things in my life that make me feel joyful, that I love. But actually, it's about making space for those things. So it's about really identifying in the things that I own, what are the things that are useful? What are the things that bring me joy? And let's get rid of all the other stuff that distracts me from that and just make space to enjoy the gifts that I have.
All right, Casey, let's talk practically then. How can we take some steps in our lives, in our personal lives, to eliminate some of the excess, some of the clutter, so that we can actually tap into some of those deep areas of joy and pleasure? Like, what does this look like in your life? How would you get started?
Yeah. And I think getting started is kind of the hardest thing sometimes because we can look at the whole big project and get really overwhelmed and just be like, never mind, I'm not even going to start. And so the first thing I think that would be really helpful to do is to really stop and figure out where in my home do I have the most clutter, the most excess. It might be causing you a lot of stress. It might be a place that always feels messy, or it's like a catch-all where you just have tons of clutter and paper and excess stuff. Or it might be you haven't even really thought about it. But where in your life is the most cluttered, that has the most excess? And then just set aside 10 to 15 minutes a day to start working towards decluttering that space. It's not realistic to think we're going to have a whole week, like spend a whole week and just take our whole house apart and fix this all in a week. This is probably going to take some time. So set aside 10 to 15 minutes, pull each item out, really look at it. Notice, like, what do I feel in my spirit when I think about this item? Do I use it? When is the last time I've used it? Sometimes we hold on to things because we think one day we might use it. But if you haven't used it, I read somewhere like in over a year, you're probably not going to use it. And so get rid of it. Just let it go. Have a box for Goodwill. Go donate it. Throw it away. And really just start is the main way to start. You just got to go and just do it.
And let me just interject a little pro tip here. I know we're not talking about relationships, but you should, if you're married, get on, like, be careful here, right?
Don't throw your spouse's stuff away. Yeah.
Like, husbands, if you're listening to this and you just go to your wife's shoe closet without some sort of collaboration, you're going to need to tune into the marriage restoration episode coming later this year. So get on the same page, do this together if you're married, or if it just relates to your own things, you can do it individually. But for me, Casey, let me just give a couple of practical examples that I have actually found life-giving and free. So one relates to my garage, which is all jam-packed. I'm kind of a fix-it guy, have probably had too many hobbies. And then while I've never had an elaborate wardrobe, I just realized, like, man, there's just too many things in my drawer and in my closet. And I created a week's worth of quote-unquote outfits, shirts, pants, etc., for spring and summer and fall and winter.
Yeah.
So I have a limited number. I literally have 7 essentially short sleeve T-shirts, 7 long sleeve T-shirts. I created a cap. So if my shoes cannot fit on the pre-established number of shelves in my closet, I don't have them. So if I get a new pair of shoes, like some other pair of shoes has got to go. And so just creating that limit has helped me. I mean, I just go in, I grab what I'm going to wear, and now admittedly, I'm not passionate about fashion. I don't want to look like a slob. Those things don't mean to me as much to me, but they have been really helpful. All of a sudden, my closet got much smaller, much neater, and simpler, and I felt great joy. The other area where I've applied this has been in the garage, and I did exactly what you described. I looked at how many times I had 4 and 5 and 6 of the same thing. One of the things that brought me great joy is as I have a lot of tools, and I realized at one time I had 6 drills. Now, I don't know if you know this, Casey, but I only have 2 arms. Like at the very max, I can use 2 drills at a time. So I donated 2 drills that I had to some young dads like who didn't have tools. I'm like, hey man, I've got this tool set. Do you want it? It brought me great joy. Like they didn't have a drill, right? So maybe some of your excess, part of it is it can help tap into some generosity. What do you have multiple of that you could actually bless someone with? Not only do you simplify and kind of clear out some of your own excess, but you can actually really be a blessing to somebody else.
Yeah, I think we tell ourselves a lot of stories about our stuff that we need to just recognize. Like, what's the story I'm telling myself about these extra drills? Like that somehow I'm going to need these. But when you really stop and think about it, it's like, I'm really not going to need these. Or, sometimes with sentimental things, we can tell ourselves stories, or somebody gives us a present and we're like, they're going to come and look for this present. That's probably not going to happen. I mean, maybe rarely somebody's going to come and dig through your stuff and make sure you still have the gift they gave you 10 years ago. But probably if it's not bringing you joy, if it's not useful, you can get rid of it and it's going to feel so awesome.
Well, so limiting what you own is a great pathway to deeper joy, because all of a sudden now, instead of having all of your energy go to 100 things, now maybe your energy starts to shrink down, and you're giving your energy and your emotion and all of that to a few things, and you're experiencing deeper. Instead of being wider, you're actually experiencing life deeper. But we've touched on it just briefly, and we want to end on this. When Jesus talked, and he talked, Casey, a lot about money. He talked a lot about possessions. The apostles did. Matter of fact, their tone more often than not was warning. It was caution, not condemnation so much as, like, the language of the New Testament is this: trap, temptations, be careful, right? Because we've seen through human history how money, materialism can get a hold of our life. But it was never just that. That was an invitation to something better, and the better was generosity. So practicing regular generosity is a part of simplicity. Because I now own less things that require less upkeep, I now have more resources and maybe even more time, when you think about the schedule, to be generous. You can apply that to your income. You can apply that to your possessions. But generosity helps us tap in to the way of Jesus. Like, Jesus is actually calling us into a kingdom life. And one of the trademarks of the kingdom life is that we live below our means, not just so that we have enough for rainy days. It's a bigger vision than that, but so that we can be generous to others.
And in that vein, we're going to spend a moment reflecting on a scripture that talks just about this. We always like to give an opportunity to practice, to reflect on this podcast. And so today we're going to just take a moment to reflect on Matthew 6:19-21. Really take a moment to get quiet. Allow your eyes to close if you're able. And noticing your breathing. Maybe elongating your breathing and deepening your breath. This is in the Voice version, and it says this: some people store up treasures in their homes here on earth. This is a short-sighted practice. Don't undertake it. Moths and rust will eat up any treasure you may store here. Thieves may break into your homes and steal your precious trinkets. Instead, put up your treasures in heaven, where moths do not attack, where rust does not corrode, where thieves are barred at the door. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I love what Jan Johnson says about storing up treasure in heaven. She says it involves investing our life in what God is doing, investing in our relationship to Jesus, and devoting ourselves to the good of other people. So just for this last few moments together today, ask the Spirit how He might be inviting you to store up heavenly treasure in your life today.
Thanks, Casey. I love that you brought us to the heart of the matter, which is actually our heart. The Spirit wants to be alive and well in our inner self. And this practice of simplicity, whether it's in our schedule, whether it's in our time, our budget, our space, is all about giving more access to our heart for the Spirit of God to be at work. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Practicing the Practices. Make sure you subscribe. We'll see you next time.